Today, my friends, we are tuning the AMG GTR, the one we all know and love from IA10, that beautiful, glorious last license test that none of us got frustrated on. I'm taming it. I decided I wanted a challenge. We're doing it. Let's get started. Hello everyone, Imposter here. Welcome back to another tuning video. Today for the AMG GTR, the car we all fell in love with, doing our license tests. Oh, I'm sure we all remember that day, and that we spent 54 hours straight with this car trying to get it through that last stupid test. Granted, it has become better with update 1.12, but overall, it just needed a lot of love. So that's why I'm here to give it today, because I made a 600, 650, 700 tune for it. Very usable tunes. And it's really quite good, I gotta say. It's one of those cars that the first time you drive it doesn't do it justice at all. Like, you kind of write it off right away. Like, they ruined this car. So I decided to give it another whirl. I know in real life this car is much more capable than what they give it in the game. So that's what we're here to address today. So I'm going to start out with the stock tune and go over what is most important to look at and change on this car when we're going over it today. So let's get right into it. Headed to Nürburgring GP today, which was a pretty good fit for this car, I think, to get a real good sense of all the things we need to modify. So here we go. Alrighty, starting out with an absolutely sick drift. Man, that was unreal. And that is actually really all you get with this stupid tune, is a bunch of drift and oversteer that is fully unwanted. So yeah, that was actually the biggest thing that needed to be addressed on this car. But we'll go by exhibits here with this lap. Okay, so exhibit A, notice where I have to brake, right here. Past 150, and in this car, it should not be that far away. This car has carbon ceramics from the factory. And as soon as I put the steel race brakes on from the tuning shop, it started braking so much better. So I have no idea what they did with the brakes in the stock tune there. It's just kind of silly. Exhibit B here, the back diff is too tight, and there was too much camber in the rear wheels. So, too tight of a diff, not enough grip around turns. That's what happens. It's pretty straightforward, that formula there. Again, braking very early, because I don't know where the heck the braking point is in this dang thing. It's so hard to predict. And under braking, it's very easy to dive the nose. And the weight transfer just feels so off when you transition into turns. If you're heavy under braking, you really got to be careful and feel the force feedback in your steering wheel if you're understeering. And then as soon as you give it too much and you understeer and let off the brake, the back end comes loose and you're oversteering. So it's just this completely unbalanced mix of driving characteristics that is not something I thought I would see from the GTR. It seems track focused enough to where you wouldn't really have to at least worry about that too much, but alas, here we are. So again, braking way late into that corner because I brake at the same point that I usually do in other cars, and I didn't make it. And that's actually very easily fixed with rubber and brakes, so that's easy enough. High-speed turn here is actually pretty good. Pretty stable, has plenty of downforce for what it is. I think it's a stock car for how fast it goes. So it didn't really mess too much with downforce aspects. But there I go again, missing the braking zone and almost spinning out after understeering, then oversteering. So yeah, pretty clear what needed to happen with this car in order for it to be at least semi-drivable. And I had my work cut out, and it was tough, but I think we did it. So 220 and a half-ish on this lap. So let's compare the times. Let's see how much quicker we can make this thing go. Alright everyone, starting off here with 600 performance points. As you can see, this is a little bit less than the stock car, which has 601.08 performance points. So we backed down power a little bit and added a little bit of weight, but overall the biggest changes were suspension and differential, obviously, to get started. So I left the tires sports hard. They're fine, you know, they can handle the car pretty well. It's just kind of comes down to how you modify the suspension to do so. So that's what we did. We lowered it I actually softened up the anti-roll bars a little bit, softened up damping and compression in the back, just so that the car had a little bit more flex to it, so that it wasn't ready to just step out at any time. But then also stiffened up the springs a little bit, just because, you know, while we want some flex in the back, we also don't want a huge amount of body roll that's going to be throwing off the balance of the car into turns. So I know it's kind of a funky balance there, but it works. And then I also lowered the camber, because I think that that was also making it too aggressive of weight changes for the car when going around turns, that the tires didn't have enough contact before the turn going into it. So made it a little bit less aggressive, so there's a bigger contact patch with the tires overall. A little bit of toe for stabilization, and then toe up front for a little bit quicker responsiveness from the front axle. Obviously with the differential, severely tuned it down, just because there was way too much torque immediately when you're getting on the throttle in this car, which isn't a surprise. You know, most of these have limited slip differentials, but so I played around with this, and I lowered it a little bit every time, and I found that the biggest difference, the biggest and best change, was when it's actually just pretty dang low. So I didn't go all the way down. It still has some lock to it, but I think this is a nice balance to where it allows you to get on the power before you're fully out of the turn. So other than that, ballast is really the only other thing with your power restrictor. So it has a fairly big ballast, 100 kilograms almost. And you'll notice I put it more towards the back, just to kind of help with weight on the rear axle. That seems to work pretty dang well. And then your 94% power restrictor gets us exactly to 600 performance points. And this doesn't have any oil changes or anything like that from GT Auto. And then racing brakes. This is interesting because I didn't expect the race brakes to be better than the ceramic ones it comes with. It's a weird setup, but for whatever reason, it works. So yeah, mostly suspension and diff here, and that gets you exactly to 600. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty proud of when I can make a tune exactly the performance point level. So I was pretty satisfied with that here with 600. But notice my braking points here, and notice my input to my steering wheel, because the whole idea for this car was to, you know, keep a good amount of responsiveness, but eliminate the need to flail at the wheel, because it needed a lot of tiny corrections, and that's just all stuff that takes away from your lap time. And so granted, I'm being a little more ginger with the throttle, still kind of getting used to it, but just notice how much more easily we can get on the power and how much later we can get on the brakes. And I feel like that's how it should have been from stock, but you know, this gave us an opportunity to learn more about how something like this would handle given the engine position and everything like that. In this car, the engine is mounted behind the front axle, so it's kind of a front mid setup, I suppose. That helps with weight balance. And the transmission for it is in the back. That also helps with weight balance. So I didn't have to deal too much with the diving of the nose. Granted, it was still there on the stock tune, but once you kind of fiddle with the springs and dampers and such, it is easy to tune out of it. And with the sports tires here, didn't go too crazy with stiffness. Obviously, I think that would be doing ourselves a disservice with entries and exits of turns. So I had to find the balance. That's why we stuck kind of neutral ground, as it were. But the high-speed responsiveness stayed the same. I didn't really focus too much on that. Really isn't that much need to change the downforce on this car for these tunes. Maybe on 700 if you want to, but other than that, you have the splitter up front and the wing in the back that do, I think, plenty. So as you'll notice, this was a much more composed lap. Very little oversteer, not too much understeer fighting, all that kind of stuff. And so that's what I wanted to evolve as we move on to 650 and 700, increase the power, decrease the weight. Notice too that we lost a little bit of performance point and still did a 216, almost 4 seconds faster. That's a huge increase. This is the right way. This is the way for this car. Alright guys, up next is 650. This one's really easy, really straightforward. Didn't change anything on the suspension. Didn't feel the need to. we just added power and removed weight from this one. And basically, you know, we didn't change off of sports tires, so that was the biggest factor. I did fiddle with it a little bit, but ultimately came back to what I started with 600 because it didn't need to change that much. And I think this is still a great balance. The biggest thing is just to monitor your throttle input out of turns. You know, obviously we're removing weight, adding power, but we have a little bit more grip with these soft tires. So you'll find the balance the more you play around with it. So yeah, pull the ballast off and put your power restrictor back to 100, and then add racing intercooler. And that's it. That gets you to 649.48. Alright, as I mentioned, pretty similar to 600, so I won't talk this whole lap. Just keep an eye on throttle inputs, steering inputs, and also know that in these tests I am still finding limits of grip, hence that little drift I did there. Kind of figuring out how far I can turn the wheel and how much throttle I can give out of certain corners. But basically we just go faster than the 600 tune here since we have less weight and more power. Everything else composure wise relatively stayed the same. So I'll shut up now, just kind of look at how I interact with the wheel and the pedals, and it's just so much less than the stock car. So one of the biggest differences between, or besides power and weight changes obviously, is the grip with the sports soft tires. And it just makes this car so much more pointable. I use that word a lot in my tunes, but that's just what makes it easier to drive overall. And so that's something I focus on, and that's part of how I reduce input to maximize output effectively through driving. And so yeah, we did a 208, 333, 8 seconds faster with 50 more performance points. So great improvement there. Last but not least, 700. This one's actually pretty easy as well if you're coming from 650. For 700, we stepped up to the racing tires. So this one has quite a bit more grip, and in turn being on racing rubber, we stiffened everything up. So anti-roll bars are a little bit stiffer. Compression expansion stayed the same, but as you can see here, the spring's got a good chunk stiffer. Changed the camber in the front just to modify how the wheels are in contact with the ground. I turned down the acceleration sensitivity just a little bit more since we have a little bit more grip from the tires here. And then that's it for suspension and diff. The rest of it comes from, we have a high RPM turbocharger on it and a racing air filter, and then all the way over to the right you'll see the semi-racing clutch. And that, along with the intercooler and the brakes, gets you to $699.99, just a tick under 720 horsepower. So this one's a lot of fun. Take a look. Okay, though I say it is a lot of fun, I have to admit it is a bit finicky. It's something to get used to, but I think that's a lot of cars at this performance point level, just because it's tuned up. You know, we take a stock car, change suspension geometry, change the tires, change the brakes. It's obviously going to change a lot about the balance of the car overall. So it's tough to, you know, take this tune and just go out and rip it first time round. It's doable, sure, but I'd practice with this one a little bit, because once you get the feel for it, it works like really well. And so with the differential tune and the grippy tires and the stiffer suspension, the back of the car stays a lot more planted. And this is where I was saying on 700 you could use more downforce if you wanted. I don't think it's super necessary. The speeds you reach, it will make a little bit of a difference, but I don't know if it's enough to justify, because you're going to increase your performance points in doing so by adding more downforce, so you'd have to lessen power a little bit. So that trade-off is up to you. I'll let you be the judge there, but with the way I was working on this, I didn't think it was all that necessary. But it's much easier to hit braking points with these tires. Obviously it would be with a lot of cars, but in general it's just a completely different car. And this is why I always say you have to give it more than a chance at just the first drive, because I know when we all drove this before 112, we hated it. I'm sure we all hated it because it just gave us such a hassle on the Nürburgring. And I know that's a tough track. You know, we're on what some people would say is the easier part of the Nürburgring. So I understand that was purposely very challenging, but overall, you compare that car to this one and it's night and day. So much easier, and it's actually nice to drive. One thing I will note though, you'll see I dodged the corners, or the curbs there. This is much stiffer, this tune, so be wary of that. Don't cut corners too hard. Not that you want to practice that anyway, but it will spin you out very easily if you do. But yeah, 2:01.997. So much faster. We lost almost 20 seconds from that stupid stock tune. That's pretty big around this track. So wrapping this one up, the GTR is kind of full of surprises, honestly. It gives you a bad first impression, and then you drive it a little more, and it becomes good after you tune it. So play around with it a little bit. This is a very worthy car to have in your garage. It's under 200,000 credits, and once you tune it, you know, it's about $250,000. And I think it's very usable for many different races, so you're definitely going to get your money's worth with it. But just give it a second chance, because I know a lot of us didn't after IA10, and I can't say I blame any of us for doing that. But like I said, I wanted a challenge, and I think I did an okay job here. So let me know your thoughts. Comment down below if you have questions. And as I always say, you know, these aren't blanket statements. This is not the very best tune, but it's a very good starting point. So tweak it to how you would drive, make it your own, and just have fun with it. That's all I have for today, guys. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. If you found value from it, consider subscribing. Gonna be making a lot more of them. That's a lot of fun for me. So till next time, everyone, I so appreciate you tuning in. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you next time.